So there has been a development in the heavyweight division. As you can see on screen, TalkSport are reporting the headline: Joe Joyce's next fight will not be Joseph Parker, as heavyweight clash is pushed back to September, and Britt will face different opponent in the meantime. This is rather disappointing, in my opinion. I was quite looking forward to this fight. It's a fight that I'd actually made a video on, I think, July last year, shortly after Joyce beat Carlos Takam. Because I think it's a good fight. I think it's a good matchup between these two, and it's a very reasonable next step for both men. I think, because for a while, a couple of years ago actually, Joe Joyce was kind of gunning for that Derek Chisora fight, and Chisora, of course, had his rivalry with Joseph Parker, which seems to have come to an end now after Joseph Parker's quite one-sided victory over Chisora. So, yeah, Joe Joyce versus Joseph Parker. Why not have it next? But apparently, Joseph Parker claims he won't be able to train because Andy Lee, his trainer, is expecting his newborn child, and the week of the fight is proposed to happen, which is understandable. You know, these things happen. Yeah, the people in boxing, they are fighters, they are trainers, they're professionals, but they do have personal lives, and sometimes their personal and professional lives clash and fights don't get made. So I can certainly understand why this fight gets pushed back, especially as you imagine that Joseph Parker, he will want to prepare as appropriately and as diligently as he can against Joe Joyce, who potentially poses or potentially is the toughest fight of his career. So I don't have a problem with the fight being delayed for that reason, of course. Granted, it's true, that's only what's been cited in this article. But if we move on, a couple of hours ago, Sky Sports are reporting that Joseph Parker would welcome the rematch with Dillian Whyte after the fight against Joe Joyce was delayed. And now, I certainly understand why Joe Joyce is saying this. Of course, he fought Dillian Whyte once before, so this would be a rematch. And of course, he lost the first Dillian Whyte fight. It was a good kind of back and forth for a few rounds, but Dillian Whyte really won that fight handily, I'd say. Though he was in trouble in, was it the 11th or the 12th round, but it was late in the fight, where he was dropped by Joseph Parker. And I think Joseph Parker is really, he probably looks back and he kicks himself, because Joseph Parker for a few years now has kind of come under quite a bit of criticism. Not necessarily about his physical ability, though, you know, some people do say his IQ and his potentially his technique does lack. You know, it's a bit lackluster at the level he fights at, which is certainly a point I make. But also his lack of fire and grit and tenacity, and he can kind of be almost scared out of a fight to the point where he becomes quite passive and he just looks to get through the fight. That's certainly a pattern we've seen in Joseph Parker's fights, especially when he's in against someone who's looking to pressure him and close down the distance and rough him up. If you give Joseph Parker time and space, he's a bit he maintains his ambition a bit more. But we saw in the Dillian Whyte fight that Dillian Whyte, who's a very tenacious man himself, quite rough, he was able to get Joseph Parker into that passive state. Even Anthony Joshua in the fight before that, just applying a bit of pressure and being quite imposing. Obviously, he's quite a big man, very strong physique, very explosive. He just cut off the ring against Joseph Parker, and Joseph Parker was very low output, very almost negative. So yeah, it's a bit of a pattern. And of course, against Derek Chisora, who's pretty much an out-and-out pressure fighter, we probably saw it the most, especially in the first fight, where Joseph Parker he looked like he was just trying to hit Derek Chisora to keep him off, and almost, yeah, he seems a bit subdued at times, Joseph Parker. I guess he's one of those guys who you can criticise for being a bit too nice. But obviously he sees this as an opportune time to get his own back on Dillian Whyte, because of course Dillian Whyte is coming off of that brutal one-punch knockout defeat to Tyson Fury. And Joseph Parker, I guess you could say, is on a high, because he recently in December rematched Derek Chisora and beat him in fairly one-sided fashion, knocked him down 4-5 times and made Chisora look like he was completely washed, which I think in reality he is. But then also Dillian Whyte, there are many people calling for his retirement, saying that, you know, his chin looks well and truly cracked. and realistically, like ask him realistically, what more does he have left? Which I perfectly understand. I do share those sentiments that Dillian Whyte probably should call it a day. And so yeah, you can understand why Joseph Parker is gunning for this rematch. It's obviously the right time in his eyes because he's coming off of a win, White's coming off of a loss, Parker's got a bit more momentum. He's probably had some new life breathed into him by the addition of Andy Lee. And also, I think there's potential there that Joseph Parker senses it would be an easier fight than a Joe Joyce fight. Because, as I've said, Joshua, White, and Chisora all had a good degree of subduing Parker by putting pressure on him. And what does Joe Joyce do very well? He puts pressure on fighters. He's a big man. He's a genuine heavyweight, 6'6", solid, very good puncher, very good arsenal of punches, moves well, has a good defense, has an underrated defense, but even if you do hit him, he's got a granite chin by the looks of it. So, yeah, I think Parker senses that the Joe Joyce fight would be tough, whereas at this stage, Dillian Whyte, probably a lot more winnable, and it'd be a good boost to his confidence because he'd be able to avenge one of his losses. And yeah, I think that's why Parker's saying this. He senses that this would be, I don't want to say easy pickings, but easier pickings than a Joe Joyce fight. But yeah, that's just the recent development in the heavyweight division. Let me know what you think of both these fights. Would you rather see Joseph Parker versus Dillian Whyte in the rematch, or would you rather see Joseph Parker versus Joe Joyce? Like myself, I think that's a much more entertaining and more meaningful fight at this stage. So that's just my sentiments. However, let me know what you think in the comment section below and I'll get back to you. Thanks for listening as always, and I'll catch you in the next video.